Hi everyone. So today we have Aakash Kamboj. Hi Aakash.
Hi Sandeep, how's it going?
Very good. And we are interested. We are discussing a very interesting topic, which is UI UX design and a project manager. And Akash happens to be an expert on the subject, who has been delivering workshops as well as courses on the edVentr platform. So just a brief about Akash. Akash happens to be a civil engineer by education, a project manager by occupation, and I've heard that he's a gamer by weekends. But what describes Akash the best is that he's a designer at heart. And in fact, that's exactly where he started his career as a designer and a young professional. He traversed many facets of the entire design and project management world, which includes social media design, document proposals, brochure communication, and all of those designs, designing wireframes, UI, UX, of course, editing, print, product design, and in his designer's disposition that enables him to go beyond the finish line way before the project is even started. This is the exact attribute that has brought him to edVentr, and he has been implementing some very successful projects, medium scale, large scale projects, and we are happy to learn more, on the subject from Akash. So once again, welcome to this conversation, Akash. We are happy to have you here, and I'm sure the
Nice to
users
be here,
users
Sandeep.
will the users will get a very different and a broader perspective from a person who's on ground, who's hands on the subject. And there's one thing that I feel, Akash, is that every organization should have a project management division, or even if they do not have a project management division, every department should follow a project management methodology to be efficient. What's your take on that?
Yeah. Well, of course. So project management is where role of a project manager is such that that person has to communicate all the things from upper management to lower management, from developers to other stakeholders, including clients and external agencies. So I think in a way, like even if a company is functioning and they don't have a designated project manager, somebody is already assuming a role of a project manager and they've distributed all these things that they have to do. So even if like there are no project managers, there are people who are like working under the purview of project management only to make sure that day-to-day things are going, or even long scale goals are being achieved. So yeah.
Definitely. I think it's a very critical skill. It is a fulcrum on which all
Hmm.
aspects of an organization depend upon, or
Yeah.
or rest upon, right? And I
Yeah.
feel that in today's day and age, I mean, we would have been doing, as you said, that somebody assumes the role
Hmm.
of a project manager. But in today's
Yeah.
day and age, regardless of what you're studying, which division you're working on, one should
Exactly.
equip oneself with project management principles to run the organization efficiently, right?
Yeah.
That's why we have you. That's why we've been doing workshops with you on project management, so that regardless of whether you're a developer or a designer, or whether in the tech field or
Hmm.
not, you
Hmm.
should learn the basics of project management. How important do you think this skill is for all stakeholders
Yeah.
in an
So
organization to understand?
in a organization there are people who are working in multiple divisions, right? And in those divisions there could be some people working in HR, some people might be working in some other operations like financials, or some people are working in day-to-day operations or sales or anything. All of them, most of these people, they're going to be managing some long scale goals that they have to accomplish for their managers, for the organization to vote well. Now these people, they have to have some sort of a management style or some sort of a management paradigm in which they have to work at a very cyclic process. Like these people have to work on a very redundant thing that they have to do on a day-to-day basis. There might be some new additions to the cycle, etc. So all these people are managing small projects for these goals to be accomplished. And like let's say if you're in HR, you have some small project that you have to do and you have to finish that in a certain time frame. So you're going to be using these project management practices in itself, like delivering these timelines to your superiors, calculating the cost of these events that you're supposed to be doing. If you're in let's say sales, like you have to have a sales campaign that has to go out. That in itself, like that campaign in itself is a project. and that project has to be managed by someone. Somebody has to take that ownership of distributing the cost, calculating the timelines, getting things approved from decision makers, implementing and assigning tasks to the people who are actually going to be working on the ground. So all these things have to be like worked upon, and like it's department independent in itself. So project management can be a project like a department in itself, but that like it cannot be a recurring, like that cannot be a process that the company has to follow. It has to be like project management in every department. So
Absolutely,
that's what you're saying on
absolutely,
that. Yeah,
absolutely. It's more like a methodology that you need to practice, or a characteristic
exactly.
even to manage your individual schedule. Sometimes we as individuals become very weak in terms of managing our schedules, in terms of organizing our tasks. We don't
Yeah.
usually monitor. Sometimes we may even write
Mm-hmm.
it down, and we miss
Mm-hmm.
out on the monitoring part, which leads
Yeah.
to the closure, right? I think it happens with most
Yeah.
of the individuals. So I mean
Yeah.
that's what I feel. It is a characteristic which is so important, and project management skills are what define a leader. Who's execution driven,
Yeah.
right?
So that
And
it is a leadership role in itself, right? So if a project manager is there, that person needs to have authority over the people who are going to be working under him. So he has to instruct
exactly,
them, he has to get timelines out of them and get product deliveries out of them, and he has to maintain this sort of a ledger, that like every instant of when the project is going on, if he needs to check what the state of the project is, he needs to know what is going on, when it's going on, where people are working, etc., etc. The questions to all answers is going to be with this one person, the project manager. He has to know all these things. So in order to do that, he has to have some sort of a systematic approach to all these things, right? So that every time he needs to go to any sort of a information piece that he has to get to, he can directly go there, because the paradigm is already set. So he can run through multiple projects at once.
exactly. And you said that they don't have a structured organizations don't have a structured project management division. It is somebody
Hmm.
who assumes that role. And
Yeah.
based on experience, and what I've observed, mostly people who assume this role in a smaller organization would be the founder or the CEO, and in
Yeah.
larger organizations would be the people on the managerial positions, who will be driving
Of course.
initiatives,
Of
right?
course.
And that's
Plus,
that's
even if
my
it's a
very
flat structure, and there are
yes,
people who are basically taking decisions, are the people who are going to be like assumed to be the project managers. Let's say you are in an organization where 13 people are doing the same things, and one person takes charge and gets in control of the other 12 people and gets them to work in a systematic way, so that the manager sitting on top also is getting the information in the same format that this person is creating. That person is checking in with other people, this person is doing like going the extra mile and being more proactive. That is the person who gets picked for the managerial positions also, because this is the quality that these people are looking for, right? This person, if he's a project manager, he can manage himself, he can manage other people, he can satisfy the people who are actually putting in the money, who are putting in their time with you, your clients, your outside stakeholders, etc. So if this person is handling all of these things, so this is the person who gets chosen for upper management also.
absolutely, absolutely. So as a project manager,
Hmm.
what is the basic structure of a project that
Hmm.
we should keep in mind, or what are the aspects of project management? How should we structure a project?
So it depends upon the scale of a project, is what I would like to say. So let's say there is a large scale project, and then there's a small scale project, and then there is a project in which scale is not even defined. So all these three
Mhm.
take different approaches. Let's say there is a project in which scope is not defined. So you like stick to some sort of a methodology called an agile methodology, in which you start developing the things that you know that you have to make, and side by side you're communicating with the person to find out what all you need to do, and side by side work on the things that you already know, and then as soon as information comes in, you start adding in other modules. So this agility of the things that you're working on is going to be required for the projects in which scope and the information is not present at like right at the beginning of a project. So that is a different approach. When there is a project in which the scope is defined and it's a small scale project, then you go for something like a waterfall method, in which you just define everything at once, and then you distribute it in phases. In phase one, you're designing everything and you're getting everything approved. You're prototyping everything, you're making mock-ups, and you're getting it tested by other people. You get some approvals in, then you get it stamped. Then you move it to other phase, that is development. In development, you're getting front end coded, then back end coded, and these phases are completed, and then you're testing it at the end of it. So all this life cycle happens if the scope is pretty much defined in the beginning and the client knows exactly what he wants. Then there is a different sort of a project in which client does not know what he wants, and the scale of the project is also very huge. So in that methodology also, then you have to stick to agile methods, in which you start implementing with the things that you already know, and you start calculating the cost of the things that need to be made later. You start calculating timelines that you have to, work that have to be done for the work that comes later, and you add all of that, and then you create this some sort of a retainership model for that person, and then you move on to like developing, or like the execution of the steps. So that, like, those are the two, like, three different approaches that you can take.
Based on your experience, Akash, how would you define agile?
So agile methods is something in which like iterations, sometimes what happens is, let's say you're doing a project, and there are some things that need to be changed in the scope of the project itself. Like, you were assigned something, but you have to change on something. So agile method is something that is in line, it's created for requirements that those come in that manner. So that is what agile method is. It's flexible. It does not depend upon anybody's like anybody doesn't need to be a know-it-all. It doesn't need to be a expert driven process. In agile method, you can like start experimenting things, you can start building things, etc., and then you can start developing them. And while you're developing them, you can test them right then and there. Testing, etc., happens simultaneously. Development happens simultaneously. Even your resources who are working there can work on multiple projects simultaneously. So agile is very flexible. It's very modular in nature when it comes to miniature tasks. So that's what working in an agile environment means. So it's not a very strictly written down process. Agile method has to have like 5 steps or 6 steps. It has to start from this, start to this, start to this. Agile methodology basically represents you in yourself as a project manager, and as a team you are equipped to handle day-to-day changes, day-to-day bugs. You're testing it, you're improving the quality of whatever you're working on a day-to-day basis or a week-to-week basis, basically. And these iterations are very small scale.
Absolutely. So basically, I mean, what I understand is that agile is useful where we are constantly exploring. We have a defined goal. We know where we need to reach, but the path is something that we are constantly exploring. We are experimenting multiple things and coming up with what is the most optimum or the right method or way of achieving.
Yeah, exactly. Right? So that's exactly that is how it's working. Agile methods basically are created for that sort of a requirement. Yeah.
Absolutely. If you look at the entire project management landscape, this entire agile methodology frameworks have been fairly new, or it was not structured in the form of a framework, which now is happening. Why do you think there was a need to shift from this waterfall methodology to a more agile way of doing things, and what prompted it?
So waterfall methods is like one of the oldest methods of managing products, and it's also the easiest way of managing products basically. And the reason is that, like, in earlier days, what people used to do is, since cost of development and cost of creating new things used to be so high, that people used to just define everything that they need to do first, and lock that process down, get it approved from whoever needs to approve that, so that liability is also gets over from this person who's creating this entire model, and then he pushes it on to the next phase. In the next phase, they're working on wireframing and prototyping this thing. Once that is done, then they move it on to the next step. So that sort of a methodology saves cost, it saves time, it's easy to implement and manage. Like, at every instant you understand what phase you're in, so nobody's confused as to where you need to be. And there don't need to be any expert people who need to manage these processes, because it's a linear process. Right after this one task is done, the next task has to be picked up, and that linear thing is like worked out for the next 5 months or 6 months or 2 months. So that sort of a waterfall method is very, very easy for people to adapt to. Let's say a new employee joins in today, and you need to onboard him to the project that was already going on. He knows exactly where he has to start. He knows this thing is already completed, this thing comes next, and this is the phase that we're working on right now, and easy peasy. So that's what waterfall method used to be, and that's why it was very, very favorite method till like up until last decade. But what's happened since 2004 or 6, around that time, is the cost of development has reduced. Like, people can experiment with more things. Like, in waterfall methods, there's no room for experimentation. But right now you have that liberty to have experimentation included into the process of your the project itself. Let's say you're creating a stadium, you can't just make 2-3 types of stadiums and pick one, right? But if you're making an application, you can make 2-3 types of UIs and pick which one UI is working for you, and then take a decision on that, and then move it out of the testing phase, put it on to development, etc., etc. And while the development is going on, you can make modifications to that. So right now the resources and the cost is allowing you to do that. Earlier, since that used to be very expensive, it didn't used to allow that. So that's why people are shifting on to agile methods, and they started shifting on to agile methods since 2010-11, and right now they just keep perfecting the process.
Interesting. I mean, definitely. I mean, cost of development has gone down. Your skill and resource. Today, people have realized the importance of having a good know-how of technical or technology related skills, and yes, I mean that has led to easy accessibility or availability of such talent or skills, and which is where I think agile methodology is going to be very pertinent. Now, coming to your next expertise or your core expertise, as we may call it, and we are soon also launching a course on UI UX design, which will be facilitated by you. What is user experience?
So user experience is, like, if you want to call it, like the basic knowledge that the people who are listening to this might have. If you know how blueprints work, UX is sort of creation process for that blueprint. Like, let's say you want to create any sort of a product, a digital product. Let's say it's a website, an e-commerce website, or it's an application, or it's Instagram or Facebook, or whatever you want to create. You start off with this blank piece of paper in which you note down what requirements you have, right? But the developers are not going to read through these sort of complicated documents or lengthy documents. These people need things to be mapped out for them, like how things are interlinked with each other, from what step this person is going to go to what step. All these things, all these steps are taken care of in this UX process, in which a person creates this entire skeleton of what needs to be created, and that skeleton is then converted onto modules, or they're converted onto user interfaces, or whatever needs to be created, like application development, etc., etc. That happens later. UX is the starting phase, which defines what life cycle this project is going to take, what stages it's going to take. It even defines what kind of resources you would require when you're creating the project, the timelines, the cost, and everything. They're all dependent upon this one key thing, that is UX. So creation of the UX is like creating blueprints of the product or the project that you're doing, and that's what UX is.
Today, in today's day and age, design thinking is a very apt methodology, right? Which people use to either build a product, or even create strategies or visions for an organization, right? And the design thinking approach does not begin from whether a business plan is viable or suitable, but it begins from what the customer really wants, right? And what kind of an experience that we need to give to a customer. So to all developers, designers, or tech entrepreneurs, or people who are building products, what will be your message in terms of laying emphasis on user experience and keeping user at the core while designing anything?
So for every whenever you're user experience designer or a UX creator, or somebody who's working on any sort of a project, when it comes to IT related stuff, whether it's an application or a website, there are two, three things that get overlooked when you're working on a very fast paced environment. Even if you're an experienced developer, if you're a new developer, new designer, you won't be able to come to decisions that quickly onto what needs to be there on what step. So these things are boiled down onto these 2-3 core values or core steps, like we call them laws of user experience. So these laws is what you need to stick to. These would keep you in check as a designer. It won't get you in a direction which is not feasible in the later stages, and it would keep you in check as to what are the limitations that you need to have when you're creating this UX. So one of the basic things that I find missing in the designers nowadays is not having the knowledge, or not having the experience to take these decisions as to what needs to be implemented and what doesn't need to be implemented. So that is something which people need to be working upon. And these laws of user experience, for example, there's Miller's law, which states an average person can only keep 7 to 8 things in his memory while creating a website, or working on a website. So if your customer is filling out a form, let's say, or picking some products that he has to purchase, he can keep like 2-3 things in his mind when he is working on those. 5 things at max if it's a very complicated process, and 7 things if the process is very, very important, let's say filling out an examination form or something. So that is something that a user would be more focused upon. But if it's something casual, let's say he's buying some shoes or buying some bags or something, then he can only keep 2-3 things in his working memory. Otherwise it takes a lot of cognitive effort. So as a designer, it's your job to make sure that this person is not focusing too much into the application, or he's not going in depth of what you are creating or what you're asking of him. He's just like there, he works with 2-3 things that he has to work on, and then he moves on to the next step, which is completely exclusive of the last step that he was on. And in these 2-3 steps or 4 steps at max, this person is taking decisions. He's completing some milestones for you, and he's like completing a sale, let's say, or whatever process that you got this person involved in. This thing needs to has to happen within small steps. And then there's this other rule called peak and rule, or there's this other form that we used to call it as in the peak and rule. What happens is the person starts at a very complicated thing and ends at a very complicated thing. The middle of the process, this person is not going to remember. If the beginning of the project is complicated or the end of the process is complicated, this person is going to remember both the things. But in the middle, whatever happens, this person is not going to remember in his working memory. So if your process is defined or in early stages, so you as a designer can take some steps. So it's easy to start the process and it's easy to finish the process. Some complications can happen in the middle, but the user is not going to have a lot of he won't be remembering a lot of those factors. So in the feedback, things they get cleared up pretty easily.
Excellent. Now, Akash, how would you define the user persona of the person who will be attending your course, the edVentr course on UX designing user experiences?
Oh, all right. So that's a tricky one. So anybody who is a designer in some other trade, let's say he is working on branding projects, or if he's working on some other packaging projects or anything, and they want to explore what user experience is all about, what user interface design is all about, interaction design is all about, the intricacies of the process of, because both of them are design processes, right? Both of them involve the same factor of empathy when it comes to design thinking, but they're different when it comes to the technical aspects of it, right? What needs to look good is something that you already understand with your working knowledge of design or your working knowledge of what aesthetically looks good. But how that thing needs to be implemented onto a canvas, how phones work, how websites work, what are the limitations of code, and what all you can group together, what all you need to segregate into different modules, etc., when it comes to applications, especially that is something like if you're interested in that sort of a thing, and if you want to explore that as a career opportunity for later stages, so that would be an ideal person. This person, so now if I have to define a persona for this person, that could be anybody who's from the ages of 18 to let's say 50 or 60, who is getting into this new business of user experience, or he's just expanding his business online, and this person wants to know how these websites are created or applications are created, so that this person can get these things created either, or he can create those himself. So that sort of a person is going to be one persona that can attend the classes. Second would be some students who are just studying user experience somewhere in their colleges and stuff, and they want to know what current methodologies are, what current tools are, up until 2008 or 2006, when the books that these people are reading were written, and 2020 that is going on right now has been 15-16 year gap, right? What new things have happened in the last 15-16 years? This is something that these people would get to explore. So that would be a second sort of a persona. Third would be some people who are just generally curious about how things are working, or because most people are working most of the time on the phones, right? This live stream, these people are also checking out on a interface that somebody has designed, somebody has coded, and somebody has created. So how these things are working, how these things are planned, how do these people come to these decisions, whether to keep this button of this color or this font of this size, etc., or videos here and menus here, etc. What drives these decisions? This curiosity can be fulfilled in this session that we're going to have.
Very interesting. Very interesting. I mean, as a
Right.
tech entrepreneur, I'm very fascinated, and I really want to learn in terms of, how do you define user journeys? And I see the research that you have done on this topic, and you've been applying this constant research, in your
Hmm.
day-to-day job. You yourself
Yeah.
have been designing user experiences and user interfaces,
Hmm.
and you've seen the application of most of these laws that you talked about, most of these aspects,
Yeah.
and all the research that you have been doing. And I'm sure users will learn a lot from this session. The practical aspect, the on ground or hands on experience that you have
Yeah.
will be encapsulated into this 3 hour course that will be soon launched on edVentr. So
Hmm.
thank you once again. Thanks, Akash. It was
All right.
very
Thanks, Abhi.
exciting talking to you, and see you at
All
the
right.
online workshop of edVentr, designing user experiences.